65% of those numbers are teachers, researchers, and our students. They're at our public universities. Because of the increase in enrollment, we're at record enrollments at our universities, we have more teachers. Because we've got a much more concentrated effort in research, because that's what our economic driver is research, we've got many more research grants, and those dollars must flow through the state government's checking account. And so every time a private dollar or a federal dollar, not a state tax dollar, but flows through that state government checking account, it looks like we're spending more money. If we have an employee who's paid for entirely with private foundation grant, that dollar flows through the state checking account. It doesn't affect our taxes. It doesn't impact how many bureaucrats are in the government pushing papers around. That's not what's happening here. They're teachers, researchers, and students. That's 65% of them. And 74% of that money is not state tax dollars.
All right, here's the next one. Well, we're veterinarians, and a lot of us are jackrabbits. I'm sorry, guys. We all meet South Dakota. We're all friends. One of the crown jewels for us as veterinarians is the Animal Disease and Research and Diagnostic Lab, and they are world-renowned, and it's an essential part of our state infrastructure, and it's also going to help sustain animal agriculture. How can you help ensure that this lab remains a cutting-edge facility and stays off the chopping block?
Well, I think it's already been on the chopping block. I mean, I can't. You run into those problems like we did in the last legislative session when we cut $500,000 out of cooperative extension, $400,000 out of ag experiment stations, and SDSU ate most of that. Now, that was the budget that was conceived of the night before the final session. That was not the budget that Senator Knudsen and I agreed on that would have spared those programs and allowed us to continue investing in those world-renowned cutting-edge programs. As for the Lieutenant Governor's suggestion that because Dave Knudsen and I were running for governor last session, our motive should be suspect, what were you doing last session? You were running for governor. And so he convenes a meeting around the governor's table the night before the final day and tears up our plan that had bipartisan support and didn't even invite Senator Knudsen, the majority leader of the Senate, to the party where they carved up the agreement. They just did it, and the next morning they presented it to the Appropriations Committee, and it was over. The $900,000 that was cut out of the heart of SDSU's Ag Experiment Station Cooperative Extension was a mistake, and it was because of that budget, and we have to restore it.
Well, the governor, first of all, I'll respond to the notion about the idea that I convened a meeting around the governor's table. That meeting was between legislative leadership and the governor and the budget director and myself, and the persons from the legislature who attended that meeting were chosen by the legislature, not by the governor, not by me. And whether you would be invited or Senator Knudsen would be invited was entirely up to the legislative leadership. The notion that South Dakota can put places like our diagnostic lab on the chopping block is absurd. South Dakota is investing in research. As I mentioned in response to the last question, we're spending more money on research, not less. And that is the reprioritization of funding. Because our economic development and our job growth is what is the answer to our budget problem. As I mentioned, as the recession has caused revenue to decline and expenses to grow, so too will economic development reverse that decline in tax revenues. Not because we raise taxes, but because there's more economic activity, and the tax dollars collected by those same rates will be greater. And that will provide the opportunity for not chopping, but adding to places like the lab.
Well, we're just going to have to disagree about this. That we aren't talking about teachers. We aren't talking about researchers. I made it very clear in my initial answer that those folks are not included in what we're discussing. But when you see a growth in the Department of Agriculture, for instance, from 170 employees to 233 employees under the watch of the Rounds-Dugard administration, you have to ask yourself, was it necessary to swell the bureaucracy of the Department of Agriculture by 33% over the last 7 years? I would take my lead on a question like that from you all, but it doesn't seem to me like the challenges facing South Dakota necessarily resulted in improvement by increasing the bureaucracy of the Department of Agriculture, or corrections, or any of the other departments that the Lieutenant Governor would just soon not talk about because he wants to talk about research and SDSU. Research and SDSU were devastated by the budget that he came up with the night before the end of the session, not the one that we had hoped to get before the legislature that had bipartisan support and would have kept cooperative extension and would have kept ag experiment just where they were in the previous budget. But, and this is critical, we would have paid for it by making government smaller, by reducing the size of government throughout and across the board, with the exception of Medicaid and K-12. And we would have saved $10 to $20 million a year going forward so that we could at least start to patch the budget problem we were facing and finish the job next year when we would have had less than 107 million facing us.
Peter Free, I'm a practitioner for Veterinary in South Dakota. Everyone looking for a job runs or depends on their past performance. K-12 education has been under fire for the last 6 to 8 years. Underfunded, and that goes from the largest district in Sioux Falls all the way to the smallest district. I would like to hear from both of the candidates, not what they propose to do, but what their record is on K-12 education for the last 8 years. I want to know what is documented that they have performed, advocated, or whatever in the last 8 years.
Well, first of all, I guess I should respond based upon what Governor Rounds has done, because as Lieutenant Governor, as you know, I'm not able to vote in the legislature except in case of a tie in the Senate. In that case, I can vote. So I have been part of the Rounds administration, and I'm sure Senator Heiderbrum will remark about the Rounds administration's record on funding. South Dakota is very fortunate that we have a very good education system. We have good teachers who care about their students. Unlike many states, we still have a large majority of parents who send their children to those schools ready to learn and fairly well disciplined as compared to other states. And I also believe that one should not measure the outcomes, one should not measure a government program like education any differently than other government programs, not by how much money you're putting in, but what are the outcomes. In South Dakota, among states that measure at least half their students, our ACT scores are fifth highest in the nation. Our graduation rate is about 80%, 10% higher than the average. When our students graduate from high school, they're in the top 5 in the nation for attending technical schools or colleges. So by those indicators, we're doing well. Our STEP test scores are very good. Our NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress, scores are good. In all areas, we compare very favorably, and in many cases are outstanding in comparison to the rest of the nation. Now, is there opportunity for improvement? Yes, there is. Sure there is. Across the nation, our students perform less capably in their achievement against other developing countries in the areas of math and science. So we need to do more there. The legislature, when it funds the education area, has taken a first dollar in, last dollar in approach. The first thing that happens when we build the budget is you fund the formula. Now, disagree or agree with the level of formula, it's been fully funded every year, except this last year when it was frozen. that time period, over the 8 years of the Rounds administration, the funding formula